estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchison River Parkway still kept open for motor traffic. Floyd bridges to Long Island hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago.
Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark, wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show. Good evening or morning, depending on your time zone. From the Pacific to the Atlantic to you worldwide. Get yourself a cup of Java and find a comfy, easy chair. And get ready for Gary and his guest on Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark. And now, here's Gary.
And here I am with a great guest, Terry Lovelace. He was abducted, implanted, and, well, can I say, it with the military, even probably tortured in a roundabout way, because they had him take truth serum. And if I remember right, Terry, at one point, basically, if you wouldn't have done that, didn't he kind of, the one investigator, kind of like threaten you with Leavenworth or something like that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They intimidated me, professionally. I mean, these guys are, they were good at their job. They knew what they were doing. I'm a 22-year-old kid. I mean, what do I know? I didn't have the benefit of a life experience or a college degree or a law degree. I'm just 22 years old and, trying to make my way in the world. And never been in trouble a day in my life. And now I got these 2 special agents scaring me to death. When I was sitting in the hospital room, we both were burned all over our body. And I had, burns to my eyes, like arc welders burns, like if an arc welder doesn't wear the face mask thing to shield his eyes or her eyes. Basically, it's a sunburn on the cornea of your eye. Pardon me. So I'm in a hospital bed, and these 2 guys came in and really interrogated the heck out of me while I was in the hospital. They implied, they read me my rights. The guy in charge read me my rights and kind of implied, well, you left your campsite intact down there. Are you guys planning on going back? Was that the deal? And I didn't want to tell this guy, hey, we saw a UFO the size of Walmart. And, if I'd done that, they'd have put me on a psych ward. There's no doubt in my mind. We agreed that we weren't going to. What we told them was, hey, we went to bed feeling funny. We woke up sick as dogs, and which was true. I just left out the part about the UFO. So, but after this guy, he says, he implies that you guys growing marijuana down there. Is that what this is about? You guys got a big bag of marijuana in your house? And I'm like, no. That scared me. I mean, this was 1977. That would have meant Leavenworth Penitentiary.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, hey, what for God's sake, is by happenstance, somebody was growing marijuana down there. They can hang it on us, So the guy said, well, you wouldn't mind if we went in your house, just took a look around, make sure you don't have a big bag of marijuana, would you? And, today I'd say, expletive, get a warrant, But back then I thought, well, if I object, it's going to make me look guilty of something. So I signed a bunch of documents. I gave them a consent search, my consent to do a search of my home. And they did, scared the hell out of my wife. And, of course, there was nothing in my house. I had a little dark room set up because I did black and white prints. And, when you live on a nuclear base, I lived in NCO housing, there's not a lot you can do with a camera on a nuclear base. So I had taken, with a telephoto lens, some photographs of the moon. And, they took those. I never got those back.
Interesting. I'm surprised they didn't try blackmailing you also by saying, well, you had a dark room. What are you doing with all these, Images.
Oh, they asked me. Yeah, what's your interest with the camera? As a matter of fact, under hypnosis, that's one of the questions that they asked me was, have you ever photographed any of the nuclear facilities? Have you ever, that was one of the things they were curious about. But what they really were worried about was that I had taken pictures of this UFO, and they knew. I think how they knew is we didn't put that chain back up, and the next morning at the park, I think the rangers found that chain down and drove in, and they found our campsite. And because we left everything, and my buddy's backpack was there, and it had his address in base housing, which was about 2 blocks from where I lived. And they called the base and say, "Hey, we got 2 of your airmen down here doing something. They got a campsite set up. Looks like they plan to come back." So I think that's how we got in so much trouble. But this major that was in my room, he had a sidekick with him, a captain. And then the nurse came in and gave me an injection, and she left, and then the captain left, and the major's like, "Yeah, I'll be out in just a minute." And then there's just the 2 of us in the room. And he put his hand against the door, because the head of my bed was right by the door, and he got down right next to my ear. And he had this, tough guy face on, and he kind of drops the tough guy look and just looks like a normal human being, and he says, you've talked to Calvin Parker, he had this Louisiana accent.
Uh-huh.
And he says, "Son, I know, and you 2 knuckleheads stumbled onto something out there, and I think you know what I mean, don't you?" And I did know what he meant. He meant the UFO. And I didn't answer the guy. And he says, "Oh, I know you know what I mean. And all I want to know is how many pictures you took of it, and I want you to give me your camera and your film, and this will all go away." And I said, "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about. I never took a picture of anything." And he got down on my face again, turns the tough guy affect back on, and says, "I don't believe you."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then you had to prove, if I'm right, you had to kind of prove your innocence. They gave you truth serum, didn't they?
Yeah, about 6 weeks later, I had an interrogation at OSI headquarters, and in an interrogation room. And one of those documents that I had signed, I had an eye injury, and I couldn't read. And I'll tell you the truth, I was too scared to read what I signed anyway. I know I signed a non-disclosure agreement, which I could care less about. I signed it under duress. I'll fight that tooth and nail if they want to try to, enforce that. But I had also signed a consent to hypnotic regression for enhanced memory with chemical something or other. Something to that effect was the caption on the top of the piece of paper. So 6 weeks later, they get me in an interrogation room, and it's the 2 agents that interrogated me in the hospital, plus this major who wore oak leaves on his shirt but no name tag. And he did a hypnosis thing, progressive relaxation. You're going down the stairs, feeling twice as relaxed, take the next step. He had a nice, smooth voice like a radio announcer. And I did everything I could to resist the hypnosis because I knew that I couldn't be hypnotized against my will. So I tried not to do everything I could not to surrender all my brain to this guy. I mean, I'm playing Beatle music in my head. I'm, doing multiplication tables. I'm just not surrendering myself. But that drug I had no control over. It was, I'm told, sodium amytal, which is a short-acting hypnotic. And they gave me several doses of it because it doesn't last very long. But when they gave me that drug and started asking me questions, I could see pictures in my mind's eye. And, I think a lot of these memories that I have, I would not have these memories had they not done that to me. It pulled a lot of this stuff out of my subconscious up into my conscious mind. And, I think a lot of people, if they don't get that into their consciousness, I think that can just lay in there and fester and manifest in unhealthy ways like, alcoholism or insanity. Who knows? But I'm glad to know what I know.
Yeah. I can tell you, when they give you that type of stuff, once I had to take sodium pentothal. I'm not going to go into it, but I can tell you what. For years, I would get little mini flashbacks. And I know it was from the sodium pentothal. And the sodium pentothal is they have to give it to you constantly to make it work. So when they inject it into you, they're injecting it into you steady while they're asking you questions. And you're telling them whatever they want to hear. That's scary.
Yeah.
That is scary.
It is scary. You know, I remember one of the first questions they asked me was, you went camping, and I said, yeah, and that must have been exciting. And you saw some funny lights in the sky, didn't you? And I said, yeah. And he says, but they weren't funny lights, were they, Terry? And I said, no, they weren't. And he said, who were they? And it came out of, I couldn't even believe it came out of my mouth. I said, they were the space people.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Have you ever wondered if they have been monitoring you since, the 70s? The military or somebody?
I don't know. I do know this. About 3 months after I published this book, I published it in March 2018, and by May, I've got helicopters over my house. Now, this sounds cliche, but I just gave a presentation at UFO Con in San Francisco, and I've got photographs of helicopters all over my house. I don't mean the traffic copter going by. I mean military helicopters, olive green, flying low, and circling my house. And they would come during the weekdays at between 9 and 10, when outside my house, the sun and a big tree blocked the front view, so that I only had about 180-degree view. And these things would do a loop around my house and in back of the sun, back of the tree, come out of the sun and fly right over my house. And I took photographs of these things. I've got 189 photographs of helicopters that I took over 9 months. And the reason I photographed them was to blow them up to see if they had any identifiers on them, because federal law says if you're a helicopter in this country, you have to display the alphabetical symbol N in large, it's all laid out in the CFR. None of these are marked.
Well, you're not the only one that tells me that, because I had a guest on. It found accidentally in Texas a secret base, and it was on a farmland, and it looked like a farm. And there was a silo there, an old farmhouse, but the only thing he noticed that was strange, by the road, there was a tower, transmission tower, not a power tower. It said property of the U.S. government. But he didn't really think much of it. And then he's just kind of looking at this farm, and he noticed all of a sudden 2 guys come out in fatigues. Okay, and then they go away, and then some other ones come out, and they go away. And then he realizes he stumbled on an underground base of some sort. Very interesting. So he's sitting there on my show, and I'm interviewing him, and we go on for a 5-minute break. During the break, he's frantically texting me on his phone, sending me messages, showing me a black helicopter over his house. Just hovering. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
That really upset him. It really actually killed kind of the interview, because he was scared. Well, a couple days later, he was on Coast to Coast, telling the same thing, on that show. And during their break, he sends me, pictures of these helicopters hovering over his house. He went out back to smoke. There's these helicopters. It's like intimidation.
Yeah. Well, my wife and I, it went on for 9 months. My wife and I at first thought it was kind of humorous. And then I kind of got obsessed with photographing them. And then, it really started to get on our nerves. And all of these helicopters had this strange light anomaly. I mean, it's the middle of the day. It's bright sunshine in the morning, but they've got this strange round light anomaly, either underneath the helicopter or attached to the tail. And after about 9 months, my wife was like, I can't take this anymore. We sold our house and moved. And in June of last year,